Nigeria's President-elect Bola Tinubu yesterday returned to Nigeria after the 32-day vacation in overseas following the conclusion of the 2023 presidential polls, saying he is strong and ready to hit the ground running. An energetic-looking Tinubu, whose jet touched down at about 4:30 p.m. at the Nnamdi Azikiwe International Airport in Abuja, arrived in company of his wife Oluremi and son Sheyi to a cheery welcome by his supporters, stalwarts, and members of his ruling All Progressive Congress. Gospel Obele, Economist, founder of Streetnomics think tank, joins us from London to discuss an economic to-do list for the president-elect. Gospel, good morning. Good to see you again. Thanks for joining us. What kind of economy is the president-elect taking over?
Good morning, Rotus. Thank you so much for having me. Great to speak with you again. Yes, number one, an economy that has been badly hit, by recent incoherent nature of policies, number one. Number two will be the fact that there's a huge cost of living crisis, at the beck and call right now. Nigerians are faced with sort of like almost a recession reality in context. Slow growth is also a major issue, especially growth that has not so far delivered on social inclusion, in context to the quality of jobs that are being created, the quality of sector engagement, as the case may be. We also want to look at an economy that's badly hit with the fact that we have a poor revenue mobilization strategy, and there's a huge debt on ground, almost to the tune of 49 trillion naira. Our external reserves and the naira is also currently failing. But at the same time, the economy currently holds a lot of prospects in terms of the opportunities and the potentials. You talk about the service economy holding close to about 52% of the GDP. When you also talk about the fact that there is a rising strong entrepreneurial ecosystem that's currently seeking to succeed in spite of government policies. When you also talk about the fact that the markets are seeking enabling policies, sort of to unlock its growth potential, to facilitate demand side and supply side engagements, as the case may be. So it's a mix of high level uncertainties, some form of pain, structural deficits, as well as clear opportunities to grow markets, grow talent, and, export that competitiveness to the world.
Great breakdown, Gospel. Thank you so much. We put together like a to-do list. I want to get your thoughts on this. I guess number one, between now and when he is sworn in, assuming the court cases go his way, how important is it for him to put together his economic team right now, the brains that will put the policies together for him?
Well, I would expect that he's already put the economic team together. And like he mentioned in one of his interviews, to hit the ground running on the 30th of May will be that he should announce his economic team. However, we've also seen, sort of a pattern, from past new president, that it takes almost close to a quarter or two, for them to announce their economic team and the full cabinet. And that's going to be very hurtful on the economy, because the current year we are in has been faced with a lot of monetary crisis, a lot of election impacting on policy and the social economic crisis. Also, the uncertainties around this particular transition of government. And when you add the fact that there's going to be a possible slowdown in announcing his economic team, it's clearly going to show to us that 2023 would technically be a very slow, and maybe unrewarding year on many fronts. So I would expect that he already has the list, and he can, like he mentioned, hit the ground running on day one by mentioning, calling out who these economic members are, and then ensuring that they take on their offices and also hit the ground running, quote unquote, based off on what the economic priority should be, from the lens of the citizens and the people.
All right, one of the first things I guess he's going to have to face up to is fuel subsidies. Gospel, I don't know, remind me, we've talked to you a lot about this in the past. Where do you stand on the fuel subsidies? Should they be yanked at once or in phases? And what about the inflationary impact?
Yeah, the first subsidy arguments are a very valid argument in terms of the rip-off on the Nigerian economy, and it's just an unfortunate narrative. But clearly, where I stand on the subsidy argument is really not for or against, but particularly on the core root causal dynamics that are influencing the need for subsidy in the first place. So if you fix power by 60 to 70% right now, and if you reduce dependence on fuel and PMS and all of that, you realize that Nigerians are more productive. So when you relax demand on PMS of fuel and all its variants, technically you get to relax the volume or the weight of what you need to bring into the country. When you fix the local refineries or find a win-win across the so-called illegal refineries, you realize that we also reduce the amount of fuel and options that we need to import into the economy. So technically, the argument for subsidy hints more around fixing the root causal dynamics of power and fixing the root causal dynamics of ensuring that our refineries are working. When you begin to fix those two, then you relax that demand. The argument is on the table because the root causal elements that enable demand in the first place are not dealt with. So whether you take up subsidy right now gradually or in phases or one-off, you realize that Nigerians are still back to the issue, which means that we are largely dependent on unhealthy and alternative sources of energy to run our homes and businesses, which impacts on the cost of living and the cost of doing business, again, which is not sustainable and largely reactive in terms of economic agenda for prosperity in the times we're in. So my argument would be to fix the root causal dynamics, fix power and fix your local refineries.
All right. Gospel, next on the list, insecurity. It's number one on the president-elect's list on his manifesto. We've had those recent attacks in Kaduna, in Benue. How do we solve that part? Is it military might or intelligence gathering, or how do you solve insecurity?
I think it's going to be a collection of a lot of variables on the table. And I also believe that Nigeria has what it takes to fix its own insecurity challenges right now. But it's going to be a lot more fixing the challenges, impacts, and holistically. Prior to now, the focus has been fixing either impact or holistically. But we need to do both and ensure all the stakeholders are very much involved with the right political will and right interest. One of the things I see happening to a very large extent in the new economy is going to be an economy built on interest as well. So if we can harmonize a win-win on the grounds of interest, then we'll be able to find a very sustainable path around fixing the security menace and all that. And let's not forget that it's constantly evolving in different variants. You have the cybersecurity threats on the rise. You have people latching on monetary leakages as another new wave of insecurity challenges and all that. So there's need to have that comprehensive impact and holistic approach to dealing with all the nuances of the insecurity challenge that we are faced with. But it's actually top of mind, to build a path towards a sustainable and sound economy going forward.
Debts, Gospel, another major issue. If we run through the figures, the World Bank says our 2022 debt service to revenue was 96%. However, the Ministry of Finance is saying January through November it was 80%. How do we get? We haven't even added CBN debts, but how do we solve this?
To solve this debt challenge is the fact that, we need to take the fact that we're not generating enough revenue. That's on the first bit of things. And our economy is, to a large extent, largely undersized in terms of its value and its potential. And we've not unlocked that well enough in terms of also on FX receipts, as the case may be. So I would want to think of, first of all, reworking the non-oil sector and the service sector, and positioning them for more competitive markets, both regionally and globally, to unlock FX potentials from those spaces. Number two will be also reworking our revenue mobilization strategy. How do we encourage more people to be in the tax net? Primarily, rather than trying to increase the tax rate. Although I see a possible increase in the tax rate with the new administration as part of its game-changing strategy to unlock more revenue potential. However, debts are a norm everywhere in the world. Right now, the UK is also faced with a huge debt burden. Let's not forget that. The challenge we're having in Nigeria is that, number one, we are not making enough money in terms of revenue locally and externally, and we are not expanding the potential or unlocking the productivity drivers in our markets enough, to do more within and across borders. Once we begin to do that, we can secure stronger revenue positioning, and with the right institutional ideology and culture, position ourselves fiscally, to be much more healthy than we are doing today, have a much more proactive budget in context, and then have, a proper plan to service our debts going forward. Because if you look at it in context to the current interest rate spree, rising interest rate spree globally, I do not think it's healthy, in context to where we are right now, debt-wise, and being able to service those debts, looking at it again from a revenue standpoint. So again, it's building impacts as well as holistically, to find a much more sustainable approach to many of these challenges, rather than trying to look for a one-size-fits-all or a one policy fits all. I think it's going to cause more problems than we have, to face today.
Gospel, less than a minute to go. I have to pick your brain on jobs, that which is a big issue. We're getting those new unemployment numbers next month from the MBS. Quickly, briefly, how can he create more jobs?
My big worry on the current job landscape is that it's built largely on hours, not on productivity. It's built largely on people, not on quality of work, and all of that. So in creating more jobs, I want to think of what are top 5 sectors that can help us unlock, that productivity for young people, not just in productivity of work, but also in reward, in context. We also need to close the demand and supply side of the jobs market. Many employers of labor in Nigeria do not know how to hire for competence. They will tell you they want to hire for competence, but the process is largely certificate driven. You also have a case where a lot of young people are not really ready for the world of work. Again, another bit to consider is the informal sector. There's a growing narrative that a lot of young Nigerians are shifting from formal work to informal work, not because formal work doesn't pay them, but informal work gives them a lot more flexibility, a lot more reward, and maybe lots more fulfillment around the context. So, and again, we need to rethink the concept of informal in terms of how that sector plugs in directly to the Nigerian economy. So it's rethinking the whole dynamics and the whole ecosystem in terms of how stakeholders are also playing their parts, in ensuring that not just job creation, but also in fulfilling jobs for young people and vulnerable groups in context. However, my encouragement to the new administration would be to identify the top 10 sectors that can help us unlock jobs and also roll out the right policy and structural alignments, to ensure that these sectors are actually delivering and they can deliver for mid to long term, for much more sustainable pathway towards prosperity in context. Otherwise, we'll be back again to where we are, in the next 4 years.
Great stuff. Gospel Obele, Chief Economist, Streetnomics Ltd. Thank you so much for joining us. Really appreciate your insights. A lot to do for the president-elect.